to work on the binding for Josephine. So this is Josephine Baker, and we have pieced it, and it is quilted, and now it is time to bind it. So for the quilt sandwich, we have the quilt top, the quilt back, and we have this white in between, which is the batting. So all together, that makes the quilt sandwich. Everything has been quilted. We have trimmed the edges after quilting it. And now it's time to take this raw finish and enclose it in our binding. So our binding has already been cut because we had it left over from another project. So now we're going to attach it. The important thing about attaching binding is to make sure that we don't start at an end, because there's going to be some attaching that we're going to do, and we don't want it to happen in a corner. That's just too much work. So I use 2.5 inch strips. I fold them in half, and I create this long strip using the 2.5 inch strips. I'm going to leave a little bit of a tail, and I will start this in the middle, just about the middle of the quilt. I like to use clips. You could use pins, and I will just clip this in place. I'll come down a little bit further and clip. I'm just going to go all the way to the edge. When I get to the edge, this isn't going to fit exactly, because when I go to do some work, hi, how are you doing this evening? When I go to do some work with this, we will get this to go here and then over here, and I'll show you what that looks like. Okay, so I like to make sure that I have enough, and I would go all the way around, but I know I have enough just because I am doing wonderful. Just because I know I had more than enough of this, but I could pre-clip everything all the way around just to make sure it fits. The other reason why I like to pre-clip all the way around is because sometimes the bulk where I actually have my seams, sometimes those seams are going to hit in my corners. And I just like to make sure, if I can, sometimes it is unavoidable no matter what you do, but if you can avoid it, that you're not going to have them hit those corners. And if they're not, then that is absolutely perfect. Thank you. So we'll use a couple clips. And what we're going to do is take this to our machine, and we are going to sew this. Now, different people will do this differently. There are some people who will attach to the front, flip it over to the back, and then we'll stitch. There are other people who will attach to the back and flip it over to the front. It is up to you which way you want to go. If you go this way and then you flip here and you flip over to the back, often people will do it this way if they're going to sew it by hand. If you're going to sew this by machine, you're going to flip it this way. Thank you. And you will add it to the back. Then when you flip it over, this edge will be on the front, and then you don't have to worry about seeing the front of it and seeing how it lines up. And then we use the machine stitch instead of by hand. I do not like to do anything by hand, so I do it by machine. So we're going to start with the back. I'm using a walking foot. Let me not drop my glass on the floor. So there is a walking foot on my machine, and the walking foot has little teeth, if you will. We call those feed dogs. And what they do is that on your machine you have teeth or feed dogs on the bottom, and that's what pulls your fabric as you're sewing. With the walking foot, there are feeds on the top. So sometimes when we're pulling our fabric with just the feed dogs on the bottom, what's on top will move at a slower rate than what's on the bottom. And that's when you have that separation sometimes in your fabric, that it's like when you get to the other end, you're like, how did that happen? Well, the way that it happened was because it was an uneven distribution coming through. So when we have thicker pieces like this, by having the walking foot with the feeds up top, along with the feeds that come with the machine at the bottom, they flow through at a much more even rate. So they'll flow through like this, and it's grabbing it from the top and the bottom. And that's awesome because it gives you a cleaner finish. Mine are 2.5 inches. Folded in half is about 1.5 inches, inch and a half, inch and a quarter, inch and 3/4. So it's about 1.75 inches. And we're going to take this and place this under our machine so that we do a 1/4 inch stitch. Welcome from, did you say England? Oh my goodness. Hello, hello. That's on my bucket list of places to visit. Let's get this off of my, I did a, what do you call that? A zigzag earlier, so I want to make sure that that does not zigzag today. Okay, and we're going to start, again, we're leaving a tail because we're going to do something with that. And we're going to stitch. I'm going to back stitch because I want to make sure that when I get ready to join those two pieces together, that my stitches don't break. So you do a little bit of a back tack, keeps that in place. And then I'm going to stitch a 1/4 inch, and I am not on the right one. Okay. I'm like, why is that going so small? This is what happens when you don't check your settings. Okay. So I'm going through, and I'm just going to go all the way to the edge, but I'm going to stop a 1/4 inch from the edge. And that's going to be about just that much. So it's a 1/4 inch from the edge because we're going to turn, pivot, and do something a little bit different with that. Okay. When I get to my 1/4 inch away, I am going to make sure my needle is down, and that allows me to move my fabric. So now I'm going to sew off the corner. So what's going to happen is on, like, let's say this corner, I'm pivoting so that I am going to stitch right off on into that corner. Normally when I stitch, I would just stitch off to the side of this. A 1/4 inch from here is going to help make that miter by sewing right off the corner. Yep, shifted just a little bit when I started talking. Okay, and we'll pull this out just so you can see it. And so you could see how this is going here, and then I went straight off that corner. I'll show it to you on this side. And so you can see on this side, we went straight, right to about that 1/4 inch, and then we sewed right off the corner. Again, this is what helps to make the miter. Because now when I pull this back, you can see how part of that miter already exists. That diagonal that is coming right off of this corner. I'm going to pull this up so that it's a straight line, like this. It looks like an extension of the quilt almost. And then we're going to fold it back over onto itself so that we can go down this edge. And I just need to see it when I'm doing this, because if I do it from that distance, of course I will drive myself crazy. And clearly when somebody was ironing this, they did not iron it completely in half. So I'll adjust that just so I can see it. And we'll clip here and here just so that we can come back and show you what that looks like. Let me get another clip. Okay. So you can see it here. This is going to be the mitered corner. We're going to have all this excess. It'll be somewhere else when we turn it. But we have that perfect, what would be perfect miter, we're going for in that corner. Okay. So we're going to fold this away from the stitching now, because this is the seam we're working with, and we're going to stitch down this side. So I'm just using my clip to hold that in place as I stitch. Sometimes this works out perfectly, and sometimes it could be just a little off. And that happens, but understand that with practice, it gets easier. Like the first couple times that I did binding, I was like, girl, did you follow directions? What happened? And then over time, as I began to bind more and more quilts, this method worked very well each time. So it's just that initial first time that just kind of drives you crazy. But you really want to make sure that if you're following the process the way it's supposed to go, 9 times out of 10, it's going to work, you know, because there's always that one. But it's going to work every time, and you're going to get these really great mitered corners. I'm coming around to that second side. I'm going to do the same thing. I will get right to that 1/4 inch, and you can measure it with your ruler. I've done this so many times by now that I can get that 1/4 inch right where I need to get it. And it doesn't always work that way for everyone, but like I said, for me it works just because I've been doing it so much that I can eyeball that 1/4 inch with no problem. So again, we're coming up on this side. We go all the way up, right to that 1/4 inch, take it off to that corner. So I'm sewing right off into the corner, not off to the edge, off to the corner. Again, that gives us that miter. I can then take this and I'm pulling it back. It's going to give me, and I'm, you know, using my fingers to help with that diagonal so that it's nice and straight this way. I like to finger press, as you can tell. I want to make sure it's nice and tight and smooth and straight. And then I take this and fold it back over onto itself to go down the next side. I can use my clip to hold this in place, and then I can start sewing a 1/4 inch on this side. Remember, now you don't have to use a walking foot. Depending on your foot tension, and depending on the fabric, depending on luck and skill, you could use a regular foot and this would work just as fine. I find that when I use my walking foot, I have a better chance of everything lining up and doing what it's supposed to do with the walking foot. That's just a better chance for me. We're coming up on the 3rd corner. Which means we only have 1 more to go. Remember, and I'll say it again, depending on where you're coming in the video, you want to stop a 1/4 inch. And you really, 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 if you don't know, if you can't eyeball that 1/4 inch, my suggestion is to mark it with your pen and a ruler, chalk, whatever marking tool you have, so that you can get it at that 1/4 inch, because if you're a little short or a little too long, sometimes it throws your miter off. Okay, clip that. So again, we can show you. So it looks like, and that's why I use the lighter type green. You can see the line here, and then you see how I pivoted and went right off that corner. Okay, and then again, that if I pull back with my binding, you can see how it automatically gives me that diagonal here. I'm kind of smoothing it out with my finger a little bit. Then I'm folding it back onto itself. Just lining it up. And I can clip it just to hold that in place. Not clip it on the seam where I'm getting ready to sew, but away from it just to hold that in place. Then I will turn this, and again, we're going, you know, now some of us had the nerve to use what was left in the bobbin because we didn't want to start another bobbin. So we're going to pray that we don't run out of bobbin on the way around this. But if we do, it's no harm, no foul. But I'm trying to clean out some of my bobbins because I have too many colors and I don't use all those colors. So sometimes I will, when I'm making clothes, I won't say sometimes, all the time. When I make clothes or items that require the bobbin to be the same color as the fabric, it's not always that way with quilting, but it is that way when you are making garments or some other crafts. Then I end up with these random threads or bobbins that are left in the threads that are in the bobbin. And the problem is that I'm not going to make, in this case, like anything else green. But there is an opportunity for me to use it for my my binding, or for part of a quilt that might have green in it, just to get rid of it. So again, off, I sew straight, and then when I get to that corner, I turn off, so it's at a 45-degree angle right into the corner. And then we're going to pull this back. Again, you can see that diagonal. And then we will fold this back onto itself. And again, if I need to adjust that, it's not really, this isn't getting sewn, but there's something for me about just making sure that it's straight, because I feel like it's gonna throw me off later, and I just like to clip that. Okay, now, I'm only gonna go down part of the way with this, and let me show you. Whoops, I pulled that out. Let me do that again. Didn't need to pull that out. Okay, boom, there we go. Let's come here. So remember, we started, I don't need that clip. We started about halfway in. It's about maybe about a fourth of the way in. We started here. So we have this tail here. We need about 6 to 8 inches, if you will. It depends on how easily you can work with your quilt. It also depends on how wide your quilt is to begin with. So if you're using a mug rug or something like that, or it's much more narrower, you don't have that kind of space, so you try as best as you can. But I want to stop like right about here to make sure that I have enough to do the magic for closing this up. So I'm gonna stop right before that. And I think I have enough thread. I'll wind the bobbin after this just to make sure that I have enough. As much as possible, I try, I mean, you know, thread, fabric, everything's that they have somewhat of a shelf life. And I also, you know, like I'll end up with a million spools if I don't eventually get rid of them. That's one of the reasons why eventually I like to get those down, so I don't have a lot of bobbins. I don't feel like buying a million bobbins until I finally decide to use the green. So sometimes it's just easier to get rid of it when I have it. Okay. Let me move this out the way. And we don't need these clips in here. I do like to use pins for this part, and you'll see why in a minute. It's just easier than clips. So we'll pull 2 pins out. Okay. I don't need a lot of this. So with this is the opening that needs to be closed up with the binding. There are a lot of methods that people will use to close this up. I'm going to do the traditional way just so that we can see it the way that I was taught. But there are other techniques. What we're not going to do is sew all this so that they both meet and then try to sew these two together. Because what happens is if you do that, when you turn this, even though it's not a raw edge, you'll see that seam and all that bulk that's there, and we don't want to see this. We want this to look continuous, as if there was no beginning and no end. And the way to do that is to use the trick that I have. Now, if I felt like getting up, there is a binding tool that you could buy. It works perfectly. There's nothing wrong with it. It just saves you some of the steps that I'm going to do now. The binding tool will give us some of the flexibility for what I'm going to do. So I need to have an overlap of 2.5 inches. And the way that I'm going to achieve that, if I can pick my binding up off the floor, because that's where it fell, is I can open this back up. I want to leave myself enough room here. And I want to leave myself enough room here. So I'm going to place this right about here. So I have some room on this side just to work with. And I have some room on this side to work with. And I'm going to place this down and use this as a measurement. Remember, we said this was 2.5 inches wide. So the binding tool would already be 2.5 inches wide, and we would just use that as our guide. I'm just going to fold this over onto this and move it out the way, because this is going to be my gauge for this one. And even if it's not perfect, that's okay, because I'll get it. We'll take that off, and then we'll place this back. And I just want a little bit, and right there to the corner, to the edge. And I'm going to go back over this way and fold this on top. And then on this side, remember, this is going to be my 2.5 inch overlap. The bottom is stopping here. The top is stopping over here. And I'm going to fold this so that it meets that edge. And I'll just finger press it a little bit so I don't lose my space. Don't you love it when your pins magnetize to your scissors? Okay, and we're going to cut that off. We'll take this away. So there's an overlap of 2.5 inches. This is where everybody has an issue. We have to get these the right way so that they don't end up wrong. I like to fold this in half and clip or pin just to get the quilt out of the way. So it gives me a little bit of work space, because it's not trying to pull apart, which is what it will do if I didn't clip it like that. And then I'm going to take my 2 pieces and angle them 90 degrees. And we are going to line them up. And I'm going to put a pin in here. Like I said, I prefer the pin because, yeah, the clips aren't going to work. I want to make sure that they stay lined up. I usually try for like a scant, a little bit of an overhang. It's not that big of a deal if it's not there. And then there it looked like that. Okay. When I take this out for now, because I always check to make sure my stuff is right, it should, even with those pins, look like it's going to fold back the right way. Sometimes it'll twist. If you're not, like I'm just so used to it, it's going to happen that way. But if it twists because you twisted it wrong, then that's why you're taking this out, to see if it lays right. And let me tell you, even when you do this, it might look like that to you, and then it might be wrong, which is why we sew them together and we check again. So you want to check before you cut. Once these are together, it folds back down again, and those pins are in there, you want to take your ruler and you're going to mark a line straight across. Now, if you're good at eyeballing, you don't need that. But you can draw a line from corner to corner. Some people confuse it and will go in this direction, and that's the wrong direction because it is corner to corner in this direction too. So you want to make sure that you're in the right space, and I know I'm in the right space because of the way that my pins are going, so I'm not going across the pins. And then what we're going to do is stitch a line from corner to corner. Okay. And that's why it's important to do it this way rather than to mark it. Some people will mark it ahead of time. Some people will use their binding tool because that works. But like I said, the old-fashioned way before we had binding tools, this is the way that we did it. You could press it over and just press it with your iron. There are, like I said, a ton of methods, but we can mark this with a ruler. I'm just going to stitch across it because I don't need to mark it that way. Thank you. Thank you for joining me today. Make sure that you are clicking the like, and if you would like to subscribe, it would be gladly appreciated. And we're going to take this and place this underneath our machine. And it gets a little tricky. That's why some people will leave a bigger opening than what I've left, maybe 12 inches. I've gotten in the habit of doing it a little bit shorter just because I've been working with mug rugs and other things that require me to work with a smaller surface, and I'm trying to perfect that. I'm going to put my needle down so that I can see that corner and get it right there where I want it. And then because it's going to bunch up on me just a little bit, I'm going to do a couple stitches straight, leave the needle down. I can pull my binding straighter so that I guarantee that everything is nice and smooth. Then I'll lower that foot. I'll do a couple more stitches. Remember, I'm going to make sure that needle is down, because if the needle's up, this is going to slip right out of your machine, and you don't want that. And then just go right to that corner. Okay. I want to take the pins out. I'm going to take the clips out. You notice I didn't do a back stitch. And that's because I don't trust myself, right? Because stuff happens. So I just want to make sure that everything, when I pull it back out to its regular stretch, that everything is nice and flat. It's not bunching up, it's laying flat, If it's doing what it's supposed to do, and now this is straight, I got it. If it's not doing what it's supposed to do, because I didn't backstitch, I can pull those stitches out and then redo it. So this is where you want to make sure it's accurate. You want to make sure everything lays the way it's supposed to lay before you do anything else. If there is a little bit of pucker, it's going to be in your binding and you're going to have a fold there. So you just want to make sure everything is nice and straight. It's like, what do they say, taut, so that it doesn't cause you any buckles or anything. There is some bulk here right now because I haven't cut out the excess, but I'm not cutting the excess until I've determined that everything is great. So now that everything is great, I'm going to take that stitch line that I just stitched a 1/4 inch away from it and trim off that excess triangle. Okay. I can either finger press or take this to my machine, I don't know why I keep calling the iron a machine. I can take this to my iron and I can press it open. That's up to you. I'll finger press it. I just have that preference. And then I will close those up. Add a clip just because. Finger press that nice and flat, and boom. Now I'm going to take this back to my machine. I am going to start a little bit before where I ended, because I don't need to do a bunch of back stitches if I don't have to. And do my 1/4 inch until I meet the other side. And go a little bit past. I can even run it off if I like, because this is all going to be enclosed in the binding. So now everything is closed up. Here is the original diagonal that I did, which is just like all the other bindings. What happens now is that it's continuous. You don't know where I started or where I stopped the binding. All you see is that in certain spaces there are these places where I connected the strips, but there's no start, no stop, because you can't see the seams. I can now take this to my iron. Let me move this out the way because I'll need it for another project. I can take this to my iron, and what I like to do is just kind of press it so that I remove all the bulk from underneath here, and then we're going to wrap it around the other side, and we'll talk about what that looks like in a minute. Okay. So of course, bigger quilts require different work, but usually I can do it on my portable ironing board, and I can use my iron. It is up to you. Some people like steam, some people don't. When we're doing this part, everything is already in there. So it's not like there's going to be a lot of stretching if you use steam. So some people, they feel like they get a more crisper product when they add a little bit of water to their iron, which will help to create the steam. I do have some pieces of fraying that I see, that's what I'm picking, that came through when I was stitching everything together. I can either, it's just a habit to pull it now, but you could absolutely use tweezers and pull it later. So we're just laying this flat, and we're pressing this open. And again, that's just going to help to reduce some of the bulk that because fabric has a tendency to fold back on itself sometimes, and we don't want that. It also gives me an opportunity to take the point of my iron and get it in the corner to kind of press that out as well. Whoops. And you can see how like the fraying here is here. And I don't want to like pull it, because sometimes you might be right up on your edge and that will pull your fabric apart, and you don't necessarily want that if you're right up on that edge. So I just pull it a little bit and then I snip. I don't know what I did over here, but I folded it back myself in the yarn. And then let me get in that corner. And then let's do this one. And like I said, I can go back and get all those little threads. I have a lint brush that I like to use to get the threads that are kind of laying on top of my quilt, so that the thing is finally done. So all those little strings, I'm not worried about those because I will go back through all this and cut all that out. Okay. Now again, this is something that I just prefer to do. I prefer to press it. It is not the end of the world if you don't. Okay. And what I like about that is that after that press, I can just take those corners and tuck them in. We're still going to do something with this, but they just tuck in nicely, I think, after a good press. Okay. Different people do different things. So let's talk about what they do. Some people will absolutely just take the binding, have it meet, and let me show you this. This is the stitching that you have when you stitch the binding to the back. So all around your project, you will see this. You could take the binding and fold it just over that stitching, and that will cover that stitching. And then your binding is, and your measurements are correct, it should fit right around this seam. This is about a 1/4 inch. This is about a 1/4 inch on this side. So it's about a 1/2 inch to get around to get to that other side. So some people will just pull it there, they'll clip, they're done. That's fine. Some people will pull it around and they can use glue. So you don't need a lot of glue, but you can absolutely take a bead of glue. You want to go, okay, it'd be nice if the glue comes out of the thing. You don't need a lot of glue. If the glue wants to come out, let me put it on a napkin to get it out. Somebody probably left the cap on, left the cap open, because there's plenty of glue in there. There we go. And you can go, just put a little bit, a couple beads. You don't need a lot. I thought this glue basting method was absolutely wonderful. So I'll show you the glue. And then you can fold it over. And just to hold it in place for now, just gonna clip. And that's only because I'm trying to pull some of these raggedy edges out of the way. And what the glue, and you want washable glue, but what the glue will do is hold this in place. And then if you take it to your iron and you give it a little bit of heat, the heat will set or dry the glue. Meaning I don't need to use my clips because the iron is holding the glue and I am glue basting instead of pinning it in place. So it's totally up to you. I love this method and I was like, game changer. But it is totally up to you which way you want to go. I feel like when you just put the clips in place, what happens is when you move the clip, the fabric moves. So the glue is like a game changer. You don't need a lot because you got to get your needle back through this. So you don't need a lot. But I love the fact that I can just use little small dots. And if you have a napkin or a paper towel or a spare piece of fabric laying around, if you put too much there, you can wipe it off. So I'm not using a lot. And I'm going to go all the way down this time to the edge. I have a couple threads that I either need to tuck into the binding or I need to cut. But I am going to go past that edge. And I'll show you what I mean by that. I'm going to clip. That's going to stay. Let me press it and I'll show you what I mean. I'll show you how to make that miter. So again, I can move those out of the way. It doesn't take a lot to set that glue. Now this is glue basting. So this is not meant to be permanent, which means I still need to stitch. This is basting it into place so that it holds while I do what I do. So right here on the edge, you see how I just pulled it all the way through so that it forms that little diagonal, that little triangle. Let me cut off these strings because that's gonna drive me bananas. Okay, so now when I fold this over, except for the fact that it's hanging up until I press it down, it's going to create that miter. And it wants to play with me and come undone, but it's going to create that miter. And on the other side, the miter is created as well. So this is where you take your time. You are finishing your quilt. You're finishing your quilt project. Whatever it is that you were working on that needs this type of corner, you do want to take your time at this point, because the prettier it looks, the more finished your quilt project looks. I'm going to clip right in the corner. And even after, because I don't want to put glue in that corner, because I feel like there's enough bulk there, I'll still leave that clip there. I'm going to go down the other, because I have enough clips, so I don't have to do this little by little by little. So I'm going to cut any extra threads that I have that I need to get out the way. And I am going to glue base that all the way down. So I'm pulling anything that I need to pull out the way that I see right now. And then I'll capture the rest of it as I go. And again, you don't need a lot of glue. And I don't like to go too far ahead, not because the glue dries, but because I get it all over my hands, all over my arms, just because I'm playing around with this as I'm going, cutting threads, things like that. So I only do a short distance at a time. There are other people who will go all the way down because they're not as messy as me. We're going right to the edge of, and it's a good gauge, because if you did a 1/4 inch all the way around, that stitch line that you were lining this up with should be, you should get just about a 1/4 inch, you know, and I say just about because sometimes our hand moves a little, but you should be getting a 1/4 inch just about all the way around. And I can just, some of this I can just push right into the binding, and other pieces I can see that I just need to clip that off. Again, that glue, you don't need a lot. And remember, if you're using washable glue, this is going to wash when you wash the quilt. It is going to wash off if you use a little bit of soap and water, if you get it on the quilt and it's beyond where you're putting the binding. So that's why you want to make sure you get something that washes off. And most kitty glues wash off. Most. Again, we're going to smooth this out right along that line. And we're going to take that diagonal all the way to the corner. And then we can fold it right from that corner to create that miter. And if it doesn't fold nicely, this is your opportunity to play with it until it does. And again, like I said, sometimes we get into that corner and we thought it was 1/4 inch on one side and maybe it was a little off on one side and off on the other side. Here's your opportunity to nudge it and fix it so that it works. Okay, so we have almost 2 sides done. I'm gonna lose her shoes a little bit. Oh. I love these clips. I keep a lot of them on hand. So I have plenty of clips to get around, as well as all the clips that I have for 50 billion other projects that I work on all at the same time. We're just going to clip. And again, if you choose, right, you could iron clip. You could clip all the way around and then iron. Either way, you're going to get a similar result. Depends on how many clips you have. Okay, let me pull this up a little bit closer. Let me get right here into that corner. Come on this side a little bit. I am going to, do I have, I got a little bit of, straight is going to bother me. See how I get it on my fingers and everything sticks. Okay, so we're going to get it in there. And I'm just pushing that all the way out. So all I'm doing is taking that binding and pushing it out. Because of that mitered corner, it's going to give me that diagonal, that point. It's just going to give it to me regardless. Okay. And then we'll lift it up just so you see it, right? When I pull it out all the way to the edge, it's going to give me that point, that diagonal. Let's get those strings out the way. So that's why I love my nails, right? So then I take my nails and I can push it back over to get it to line up. If I need to fudge it a little bit, I can fudge it just a little bit so that it lines up perfectly. But again, this is your opportunity. Like, don't skip this part in trying to get that straight. And sometimes it's just not going to be perfect, and that's okay. You want it to be as perfect as you can possibly get it. And then clip. Or get a little bit more glue in there to get that side going. And we are almost around, and then all we have to do is just stitch and we're done. Like, those threads just bother me all the way around. And this is just typical. Okay. Somebody needs to get their scissors tightened and they need to get them sharpened. So I need to look and see. There is a quilt show in town in 2 weeks. And if they have the scissor sharpener person like they have had in previous years, somebody takes all their scissors and gets them sharpened all at the same time. So the great thing is you can walk around the show and you can also, you know, shop while you're waiting for your scissors to be sharpened. And they do it like right then and there. So we know that there are some places where you have to drop them off. Part of the beauty of being at the show is that I can get them sharpened and go on about my business and come back and get them. And it would be nice if I went and looked to see where he is, because if he's somewhere here near me, I could absolutely just take them to him on a regular. That would be too much like smart. Okay, and we want it to go to the edge. I think I went a little bit too wide over here, but that's okay. I'm gonna make it meet that side. And we will cut these off because I can't tuck as nicely as I would like to. Okay, a little glue in that corner. And let's close the cap so the next time I try to use it, it won't be all taking me 20 million years just to get a little bit out. And then we'll do this last corner. And clip. Okay, so everything is clipped. And we're just going to press to hold it in place, and then we're able to stitch. Now, knowing me, my iron probably dried a little. Now, I did use a lot of glue. So because I did not use a lot of glue, some of the glue in some spaces may have started to tack a little bit, which is fine. So when I remove the clips, the fabric may not move. Okay, and again, we're just basting. This is not permanent. So this is not meant for you to leave this and then just go on about your business and say you're done. And depending on what the glue did, there may be some spaces where it'll pop back up on you, but it's not going to be many. So even if it pops back up, that's fine. When you're going to stitch this in place, you're going to knock it back down anyway. Thank you, thank you, thank you for tapping the, not for tapping the screen, Lord. Thank you for hitting the like button. Thank you so much. I appreciate you. Thank you for those people who have subscribed. So the iron is helping to set the glue. So we are glue basting. You can absolutely use a glue stick. I'm using that glue because I had a whole bottle of it. So it doesn't make sense to run out to the store and buy a glue stick when you have glue already in your house. Okay. So everything has been glue basted down and everything has been set by the iron. The iron can be out the way because there's nothing left to iron. The only thing that I have left to do is to make sure that I have enough thread in my bobbin. And it almost looks like I should make it. So we are going to play chicken with our thread, because I'm not going to start a new one over for this, because I might make it. Okay. When you stitch yours, it is up to you how you want to stitch your binding down. What do I mean by that? You could do a zigzag if that's what you prefer. If you do a zigzag, I would do a small zigzag, like maybe less than maybe about 1/8 of an inch wide, because I just want to capture the binding and capture the quilt. Capture the binding, capture the quilt. So I really don't need to, I don't need it to be so wide that it's like it's obvious. I want it to just capture it on both sides. You could use a decorative stitch. It would look absolutely cute to go around a binding and have stars or circles or squiggles. It's up to you. Or you could do like I do and do a simple straight stitch. So I am going to straight stitch all the way around this. When I straight stitch, I like to get as close to this edge as possible. Number one, I don't want to see the stitching underneath of it from where I attach the binding. And number two, I don't want the binding to push back up like a flat. Because my hand-eye coordination isn't all that great, I'm not going quickly. You are going through a lot of layers. You want to have a new brand or a good needle. I won't say brand new, I'll take that back, but you want the needle to be sharp. So if you haven't changed your needle in months, you may want to change your needle before this. You're going through a lot of layers of fabric. Again, it is up to you. If you come to the front, you're stitching this down. One of the reasons why I don't like to stitch it on the back is because sometimes it goes into your backing. If your backing is, like in this case, because I use scrap, because it's a wall hanging, I don't care what the back looks like. But if I use something where it really mattered, sometimes your stitches will be a little off and it'll go onto your back. So, you know, you want to make sure that it just kind of looks right. So you take your time going around it. So that it'll look as best as you can possibly get it. And there's no rush. Even if this was a king size quilt, I would still follow the same method and still take my time. And we know that if you were using a decorative stitch, it would take that much longer. The decorative stitches take all day. That's why I don't use them. Okay. I came too far over this way. I'll adjust that a little bit. Need a flashlight. Okay. Just want to see how far I'm making, because I don't mind changing the bobbin. I don't mind playing bobbin chicken. What I mind is sewing and then realizing that I ran out of bobbin a long time ago. That's the part that drives me bananas. Like, I could care less whether I run out and I have to start over again, especially like when I'm using up scraps or trying to run the bobbin out like this. That was the whole purpose. just running right along there, making sure we are on the third side, or I should say fourth side, but we started midway on the first, so we have to get back down that first side. So we're almost done. And Josephine will be completely bound. And I think that I'm going to make it right to this corner. Is that where I'm going to make it? Yep. Okay. So I am going to stop it right here in the corner. And you can see, this is how much I had left to go for that bobbin. So I didn't have much at all. And I probably, and you're gonna say, well, you still gotta wind it, right? And do, but I don't have to wind as much. I don't mind losing a little thread. I'm not gonna lose a lot of thread in this process. So I only need from here to the end. That's all I need. So I'll quickly just wind this again because I did not, this is a specific type of thread that I use. I do want the same type of thread. I knew it was from this. So I know I don't need a lot to finish that off. And we're going to pray that this doesn't get caught up, because sometimes it wants to do that too. Okay, we're going to add that in there. We'll rethread our machine, and then we'll finish that part up. I do have a threader, a needle threader on my machine. Sometimes I don't use it. Sometimes I just use the old method of cutting a sharp edge off of the edge of the thread and running it through. And then other times I'm like, girl, you have a thread, you have a threader on your machine. Why are you doing it that way? Okay, that's set back up again. I cut the threads off here. So we're gonna turn that right into the corner. I'm gonna do a back stitch in that corner. Because 9 times out of 10, you're not paying too much attention to the corner. Let me cut these threads off of here, just so that I don't have to worry about them nesting with the other when it comes along to that side. Now the good thing, I would do this from the back too, so it wouldn't matter. But the good thing about hand stitching is that you never have to worry about the bobbin. You just have to keep rethreading the needle. Okay. Okay, and then you can see the stitches on this side. If I turn it on this side, you can see where it caught here, and then sometimes it ran into the ditch, and then you can see sometimes where it ran over here. So sometimes it ran into the backing, sometimes it ran into the ditch, sometimes it ran on here. And that's okay, because it's the back. And nobody is going to see the back. Well, they're going to see it, but nobody's going to care about the back because it's the front that they're looking at for this particular quilt. If you're concerned about the back and the front, you can't guarantee that when you do it by machine that it's going to capture in the same place at the same time. You can guarantee that it's going to look even if you stitch it by hand. I mean, if you sew it by hand. So that's when, if I'm concerned about the front and the back, if I'm putting this in a show and somebody's telling me that it needs to look a certain way, if I'm giving this as a gift and I want the back to look a certain way, then I would hand stitch it so that it looks even with the hand stitches and that I know that it's going to be uniform throughout. If it is, I was just scrolling and came across your channel. Oh, awesome. How are you? So if you hand stitch, you're guaranteed to get a better result. So that's why people like to hand stitch. Me, I'm not worried about that. And like I said, if I am worried about it, I'll hand stitch. But Josephine is done. I have about 3 more quilts that I'll be doing offline, but I am working on finishing the binding for at least 4 projects this weekend. So I have 1 done and I have 3 more to go. But this is Josephine. Josephine is bound. I did not add a hanger on the back of this as I should have. So I will probably just sew that on by hand because I'm not going to go back and sew it on to here the way that it should have been sewn on. But I will probably do that. And I just have to sit up for a second. Just started learning how to quilt. Oh, thank you. Of course, I get, the machine as far away from my eyes that I can't read as possible. So, like I said, this is extremely cute. It came out well. The binding is done. You can see, let's see, you can see the corners. And I'll show you all of them because in some cases, some look better than others. If I press that down a little bit more, that'll be fine. So you could see those corners. Okay, and then you can see them on that side as well. Okay. So the mitered corners are done. This mini quilt is finished and it is ready either for a home on my wall or a home on somebody else's wall. But Josephine is done. So thank you everyone for joining in today. Remember, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and look forward to future videos. Again, leave me comments if you would like to, if there's something that you would like to see. I'm more than happy to show you how I do it, and not necessarily how everybody else in the world does it, but this is how I do it. So have a great day, and I hope to see you soon.